So moving on to today's political section, we are once again joined by four guests. I am joined by James, Hugo, Max, and Joel. Hello to you all.
Hello.
And we're going to continue with a similar format to last week's episode with lots of short, punchy political debates. Hugo, I'm going to come to you first. You have 30 seconds to start any debate about any topic you like. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So I think topically I'll pick COVID because obviously it's more relevant. So I just wanted to know everyone's opinions on maybe like a 1 to 10 scale on how you think the government's done during the pandemic overall, taking everything into account, vaccinations, everything.
Hugo, can I ask for your 1 to 10 rating?
My 1 to 10 scale would probably be about a 4.
Okay, Hugo's one of the 4. Do you want
Yeah.
to develop on that? Or
Well, I think I don't think they've done as badly as other, harsh critics have said they've done, but they screwed up with track and trace. They didn't. The start of the pandemic, we did not deal with well, and that ultimately led to us being one of the highest in Europe. However, obviously the vaccinations have pushed the rating up a bit because we're far ahead of everyone else in Europe in terms of that. So yeah.
okay, James, 4 out of 10, higher, lower, or the same?
I'd say a little bit higher, maybe 5, maybe 5.5, I think.
Just a little bit higher. Go on.
Right. Okay. I mean, personally, I don't think the government's done a great job. I think that although they haven't done a great job, I think they deserve a bit of credit. I mean, the vaccination program, the vaccination program it's been amazing. I mean, I'm hardly an advocate for Brexit, but I think that our exit from the European Union has really helped push the vaccination drive. But on the other hand, I mean, that kind of pushes my rating up like probably about 2.5 points. But I think the actions in the summer were irresponsible. I think that I can't really blame them for locking down too late because it was unprecedented. They probably should have done it a week or so earlier, and I'm sure that made a big difference. But it was unprecedented times, and now that they know the disease a bit better, I hope that they will make more responsible decisions, like for example not opening schools. I think that would be a stupid thing to do, opening schools now.
Okay, fair enough. Joel?
I think before the vaccination process, maybe a 3, but that's really like brought up how well the country have dealt with it. What you can say is that the furlough scheme and the vaccination, you have to credit the government for, but before that, it was really poor. And one of the main reasons why we were probably the worst country in Europe and why we dealt with it so poorly, the timings and everything, why we went into lockdown so late, why things were open too quickly. Yeah, like a 4 or 5 at the moment.
Yeah. Charlie, last week on the podcast, you said that the UK as a country were in a good state at the moment. Is this down to a good handling of the coronavirus pandemic?
I did say that. I did mull up my wording though. I did mean in relative terms to the rest of the world. I do slightly retract my statement. To be honest, it was probably not a correct statement to say. My personal view of COVID would generally probably be, I'd probably say 5, slap bang in the middle. I think as we've alluded to, the vaccination process has been unbelievable. I think, again, being out of the EU and Brexit really did help that along, as we would have been in the starting blocks of the vaccination process only a few weeks ago. I think now we've over 12 million vaccines, I think, 12 million vaccinations, which is monumental for the country. I do think we should have locked down earlier. I think we should have seen what was happening in Italy, how quickly the disease was spreading. And I think personally, Boris Johnson was the wrong man for the pandemic, in my opinion. I think because has a bit more of a cavalier attitude.
Is there a right man for a pandemic?
Well, I would, in my opinion, I think Theresa May would have been a good woman for the pandemic. But she's not a very good prime minister, but I think she would have been good for the pandemic because I think she would have locked down quick, and I think she'd have been a bit more sort of conservative and cautious in terms of the way which she would have handled the virus. But again, it's a tough one because again, these were unprecedented times, and I think it's very difficult to judge a government based on such extraordinary circumstances.
James, have you got a point to follow on from that?
No.
Oh, it says your hand is raised. Okay. A question to everyone. A few shop and restaurant owners are calling for the return of the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. What are your thoughts on this? Should the government go through with it? Or was it a mistake to introduce it in the first place back in July, was it? Hugo?
I think it was a mistake in the first place, because that was what brought the rise of cases in sort of September, October, and what forced us to lock down again. I mean, obviously we have to help businesses, like we can't let them all sink, but it has to be through a different way, because it just encourages people to mix and meet each other, which obviously will increase cases. But no, I'm not sure what they'll do, but Rishi Sunak needs to think of a plan to help the economy, because I don't think that was the right move at the time, and I don't think it should be brought back.
Max?
I think the initial Eat Out to Help Out scheme was necessary, because if we hadn't done that, we'd still be here now. I don't think we would have done it at all. And to keep these businesses afloat, it had to be introduced. Otherwise, when this whole thing is over, they wouldn't be able to get back up again.
James?
I mean, I don't know about you, but I love the scheme.
Yeah, I think we all did, using it.
Yeah,
to
I mean, I enjoyed it.
It's not about us loving the scheme, James. It's the fact that we've had to lock down 3 times.
What was it? It was pretty much made by August. But in my opinion, I think it was necessary. It gave, I mean, not necessary, but I think it gave a much needed cash boost to these businesses, which was shut for so long. And it definitely got people out, which I think is what they wanted. But if we're talking about the public health perspective, from a public health perspective, I don't think it was the right thing to do, because it got too many people out. But
yeah,
in my opinion, economically, it was clever and very nice.
Okay, we're coming up to 5 minutes on that topic. Thank you very much, Hugo. Quick summary: who's in agreement with Hugo that the handling of the virus has been around a 4 out of 10? Pretty disappointing. All right. Well, I just realized this is a podcast and you can't all see this, but I think we're all in agreement. Wait, no, all in disagreement. What am I talking about? Who disagrees with Hugo?
I, to a degree, disagree to an extent. I mean,
better or worse than Hugo's evaluation?
Well, I think they did better than Hugo's evaluation, yeah.
Okay. Right, moving on. Who should we have next? James, do you want to
go? Okay.
Don't have to.
Well, okay, my question is, are the Conservatives delivering, and have they delivered on their 2019 election promises? Okay, so my opinion on this is that, I mean, their 4 main election promises were getting Brexit done, building a stronger NHS after 10 long years of austerity, and building an Australian style immigration system, introducing that to control immigration into our country after our exit from the European Union, and reaching net zero by 2050, and building on that and working towards that goal. So the first goal, I mean, I'm sure you all probably know that on the 31st of January last year, I mean, the government, we exited the European Union, and they delivered on their biggest promise. They got Brexit done after 4 galling years of dither and delay, and they now we're out of the European Union and we can move on. So in my opinion, that was one of where they prevailed. And on the second main aim, I think they aim to build a stronger NHS after austerity. I mean, at the moment, I think they're doing. I think the pandemic has really exposed care that our NHS really needs. It needed strong investment. It needs strong restructuring. I think that the government they've delivered that. As you've seen a few weeks ago, they've restructured the NHS, got rid of Public Health England, put the NHS in the hands of the government where it should be. So you can really make sure that money is going to the front lines. and to where the people need it. I mean, yeah, and they also, I mean, the key figures of this policy was that they aim to employ 50,000 nurses by the end of the 5-year term. They're already a quarter of the way through, and we're only just a year in. I think that kind of says it all, in my opinion, and it's a record high.
Okay, thank you for that, James. Joel, what would you say in response to that?
I think it's quite hard to judge their promises because they obviously didn't realize that we're going to go into a global pandemic. But I think it's really exposed the Tory government that they and Boris Johnson, that he's failed to act on a lot of stuff, and he at first really failed the NHS by not giving them the right PPE and not supporting them in the right way at the beginning of the pandemic. When the World Health Organization were advising them to go into a lockdown, they ignored it at first. Like Boris Johnson missed 5 Cobra meetings before the pandemic, about the pandemic. And there was only a couple of weeks before we went into lockdown that he started to consider that we might be having like a really big problem. So on the their promises, I don't think it's fair to judge them because of the pandemic, but I think that the pandemic has showed that there's a lot of gaps in the government.
Definitely. Charlie, as a Conservative Party member yourself, are you pleased with how the political scene in this country has been since the 2019 elections?
Again, that's a pretty ambiguous question because obviously COVID has got in the way massively. But in terms of, as James said, getting Brexit done, I think we've done brilliantly as a government to do that. I think Boris Johnson was the man to get Brexit done. I also think that funding the NHS as we have done has been really important, and I think that I wouldn't say I'm a fan of Boris Johnson as such, but I'm very happy that Jeremy Corbyn is not in power. That's all I can say really about it. And I suppose once we get out the pandemic, we can really truly see how this Tory government is gonna how it's gonna perform in terms of how do I say it? In terms of I've forgotten the words. I've forgotten the word.
Okay.
Just performing on their manifesto.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Hugo, famously a non-Tory backer, what have you got to say?
Well, I mean, firstly on getting Brexit done. I mean, yes, technically it did happen. We did do a deal. However, as shown by many interviews with lots of companies that work in and out of the UK, it shows that it was a terrible deal for the UK, and it will cost us billions a year because of. So did you see like a while ago when the trucks weren't being allowed into Calais? To deliver and export and import goods, which is it's not good, and it's something that would not have been a problem if we were still in the EU. And I think that you try not to judge it on the pandemic because everyone in the world has faced it. However, we have dealt with it so much worse than other countries, which shows that the incompetence of the Tory government and its cabinet. It shows that I don't understand how none of them have resigned yet, because they've all done terrible jobs, especially Gavin Williamson, with the schools. So I think that since 2019, they've really not excelled at all, and they've obviously lost lots of points in the polls because of their handling. I think also with the NHS, the NHS is built specifically to help, for a situation like COVID, and the fact that it was so we were locking down because of the NHS, because the NHS couldn't handle the influx in people going to the hospitals. This shows that the government, have failed to deliver. They failed to deliver with the PPE, and they failed in general, I think, since their manifesto.
Max, anything quickly to add, and then back to James?
I think opening the schools was necessary because we live in a urban society where we're in a bubble and we can all accept that online school works. However, in rural locations such as Kent, people haven't been to school in 8 months. They haven't been online school for 8 months. They've missed a whole year of learning. You had to bring it back at some point. Otherwise, there are people who aren't learning anything.
Yeah, big questions over how the education department has really worked these last few years. James, over to you to summarize, answer any points that have been made, or
firstly responding to Hugo's comments. I mean, I think we can diverge from the pandemic because we've spoken about that before. But I agree with him. I think that the pandemic has really exposed the cracks that are in the NHS. But I think it's also very unfair to blame this current Conservative government for that, because it's a completely different government to who have been in power for the whole of the 2010s, who adopted that policy of austerity, which tore our NHS apart. And I think that the Conservative government, one of the first things they did when they got in, they passed that £34 billion spending bill on the NHS. And I think that just shows how committed they are. They are the party of the NHS.
Okay. Thank you very much, James. Again, let's do a little quick vote. All those who think that, pandemic aside, as much as you can do that, have had a good start to their term in government. Charlie's got his hand up. Max has got his hand up. So has James. Joel and Hugo don't. Okay, thank you very much for that, James. Joel, should we come to you next?
Yeah, sure. Because do you think it's time for change in government? That the Conservatives have been there for a number of years now. Do you think it's time that Labour get their turn, and do you think it'll suit the country better?
Okay, well, we're definitely seeing a growth in popularity in the polls. Would this be good for the country, James?
No.
Why?
I mean, in my opinion, there is a reason that the Conservatives have been in power for the last 44 of 75 years. It's because they serve the people. I personally think I like Tony Blair. I like Tony Blair. Not a massive fan of Gordon Brown, but I think they did a great job. But I think for Labour to do work for the country, they need to move further to the centre and stop focusing on the flawed ideology of socialism, and start working for the people.
Hugo, you could barely stay in your seat.
Okay, James, if you're saying that no, but then you're going, oh, I like Tony Blair, that doesn't make any sense, James. Tony Blair was.
Tony Blair's centre right. Tony Blair's centre right.
There's no Tony Blair in the party right now. Keir Starmer is no Tony Blair.
I mean, I would say that actually Keir Starmer is the closest Labour leader to Tony Blair that they've had in a while. He's much further right. He's not right wing, but he's much further right than Jeremy Corbyn, Gordon Brown. He is. But anyway,
everything that was in the 2019 Labour manifesto, which Jeremy Corbyn himself claimed was a radical socialist manifesto, and he still backs. He had an interview 2 months ago.
But I think Jeremy Corbyn
everything in that manifesto, and if that doesn't say that he's as far left as Jeremy Corbyn, I don't know what does.
He's not as far left as Jeremy Corbyn in any way. But I think obviously, I mean, I don't actually think Jeremy Corbyn would have been a good Labour leader, but I think he's a man of the people. He fights for what is right. And I think that a Labour government would hugely benefit mainly not lower class, but working class people. If there was a Labour government, because it's just there's obviously we know there's a clear divide in the manifesto. It's very stark contrast, but I think that you ultimately have to go with a government that will help the majority of the country, and I think a Labour government would do that. They would help increase social services, housing, a housing crisis that the Conservatives have failed many people in the years. Stuff like Grenfell Tower, the cladding in those towers has still not been fixed. And the people at Grenfell who were in Grenfell Tower have still been ignored after that. And I think that is, I mean, I know it's not a big issue, but that's a massive failing of the Conservative government. And I think something that would be much rectified with a Labour government.
Charlie?
I think let's just talk about the general election of 2019, right? Jeremy Corbyn, who is probably as far left as the Labour Party has ever seen in terms of their leader. Labour are not the party of the working class. Why is that? Well, in the red heartlands up north and in the Midlands, they lost so many seats. In Wales, they lost a lot of seats.
But they lost seats because
that's a clear rejection of socialism.
No, it's not, Charlie. No, it's not. It's well, Labour did not focus enough on Brexit in their manifesto of 2019. They did not focus enough. It was a Brexit election, and they lost that. I completely accept that they lost the Brexit election, but that is not why they lost voters. It's because people up north could see a clearer plan with Boris Johnson as leader in terms of getting Brexit done than they could with Labour, because Jeremy Corbyn did not focus on this, which shows that not a failure in socialism, but it's a failure in you know what the Labour government, what the Labour Party were trying to do with their views on Brexit.
Joel,
well, can I just say something? I was watching a quick video. I was watching a clip on YouTube, and they were interviewing people after the general election in these constituencies that had previously been red for so long, who had now turned blue. And they were interviewing people who literally said, for 60 years, I would not have dreamed of voting Conservative, but this election I did.
Yes, that was because of the Brexit, Charlie.
It's really.
You can't just obsess over Brexit.
No, because it was a Brexit election, Charlie. That's literally what the main focal point of the election was. That was Boris Johnson's main talking point. He had that on all of his signs in front of when he was doing his speeches. He said, "Get Brexit done. We're going to get Brexit done." That was his main selling point, his main talking point. You can't say it wasn't, because it was. What else was it if it wasn't Brexit?
It was a main talking point, but certainly it wasn't the whole. It didn't encompass the whole of the.
But it was it's been nicknamed a Brexit election by many people, James.
I think Hugo's point is that
I think I understand what you're saying. However, I also think that it was a rejection of the ideas of the far left, in my opinion. It was, I mean, the North especially. If you're talking about the North in particular, they were not just compelled to vote Conservative by the fact that they voted Brexit and the Conservative Party was the only party in the election other than the Brexit Party, but they weren't really relevant for Brexit. But as well because they weren't drawn to the Labour elitist, like Labour leader. Okay, we can look at Labour leaders. So Jeremy Corbyn,
to hurry you up.
From North London. He in no way did the Northerners feel any connection to him. Same as Keir Starmer, and that's why I don't think Keir Starmer is a good leader.
He's gone up in the polls.
So. Keir Starmer way more
Joel, I'm going to come back to you. Just how beneficial would a Labour government be for the UK coming out of this pandemic?
Extremely. Well, I think it's just nonsense. Why are we looking at Jeremy Corbyn? Well, everyone knows that he was a bad fit. He wasn't the best leader, but Keir Starmer appeals to far more people than Boris Johnson. And it's sort of like what happened in World War II to the Conservatives, Labour. They said, well done, you've done the job, like in reference to COVID and Brexit, you've done it. But now it's time for Labour to take them into better days, to apply to more people. And I think it's like Corona, the lockdown, has made more people like they've appealed more to Labour because it's about freedom and about equality. And they think like there's so much stuff that has happened recently that sort of means people are going to be more in favour of Labour. And I think Boris Johnson like keeps showing, apart from his vaccination programme, which I think is quite good, give him credit for that he's not a fit leader, and that Keir Starmer is far more.
Hold on, wait, Joel. I just want
James. We're gonna move on from that because we're running out of time. Thank you very much for that, Joel. I don't think there's any point in having a summary vote because I think we all know how that's going to go. Max, let's come to you finally.
Okay, I'm going to veer away a bit from Brexit and COVID and all that and go for a general debate point. I'm putting forward, do you think demand justifies the gender pay gap in certain situations?
Very interesting. Okay, we're moving away from all this talk about COVID because, quite frankly, I think we're all getting bored of it. Hugo, Should I come to you first?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very interesting topic that doesn't really fit to party divides. But I think that it's obviously a very touchy subject because, especially now more than ever in 2020 and 21, it is much more activism to do with, the gender pay gap, gender issues in general. And I think that I wouldn't say it does, I wouldn't say that demand does justify the gender pay gap at all, because I think that in some jobs that are more male dominated, that there's more of a gender pay gap because of the work that's being done and because of basically. But like, I think that jobs that there is a, and let me rephrase this, there's a lot of there is a stark gender pay gap in jobs that are divided between men and women, which is obviously an issue, because I think that if they're doing the same job, they should be paid the same amount, obviously. But I think that, it's interesting because for some jobs you could have more male applicants, for some jobs you could have more female applicants. And I just think that you need to look at each job and role in particular and see which person is better suited. And I think that it shouldn't be based on gender. It should be based on skill and application on what these people are paid. I think gender should not even be accounted for in any way.
Okay, well, what about shifting our focus to sports? In the world of football, we all know how massive male footballers' paychecks are. They're paid just ridiculous amounts. You take the highest paid female footballer in the world. I don't know who she is to the name, but she won't be paid anywhere near as much as the highest paid male footballer. But would it be viable? Would it be possible to pay these players the same amount, considering how much bigger the men's game is to the women's game? I mean, that is kind of going off on a tangent, but
I think yeah, it's valid. I think not at the moment, because I think where women's football is growing, it is growing, but it's not at the heights of male football, and it's not really about the clubs or the money in general. It's mainly about advertising. It's just that simply the male game is more advertised, it's more watched by more people, and that's why they are paid more. And I think that as time goes on, there will be much more viewers of women football, and it means that the wages will increase. But I think, yeah, in stuff like sport, I think there's an exception.
Max, what's your response to that?
But I think that the demand is the justification for the pay gap. What you've just said is a justification, because
I think
the pay gap, either you decrease the men's wages for the sake of making it equal, which I don't think works, because then someone will always outpay you because they want the players, or you raise the female wages, which just isn't possible, because if you gave all the males wages, hundreds of thousands a week for a whole team, that is well above the revenue teams generate, and it's impossible. And it's not, because football's a business at the end of the day, and they won't be making money if they do that, and they don't need to do that.
Yeah, Charlie.
I completely agree with Max on that point. I think, again, do I accept that the gender pay gap is a real thing? Absolutely. And do I accept that it's a bad thing? Absolutely. It is a bad thing. But I think in terms of this example in football, it's all to do with supply and demand, right? And if you're not making if a women's team isn't making anywhere near as amount of money as a men's team, then you can't pay them as much. And it also, interesting figures from the World Cup, the Women's World Cup made £73 million, whereas the Men's World Cup made £4 billion. So it all comes down to, demand. And if women can improve as footballers, then the demand to watch them will increase. Therefore, we'll be able to pay them more. And then how do we do that? We provide opportunities for women to get more involved with the sport and encourage them to just get involved and try and improve, which I think is the only way.
Okay, hang on. I just need to restart the recording. I want to move away from the football example, because this isn't just happening in the world of football. It is happening everywhere. A female TV presenter will not be paid as much as a male TV presenter. And the same case for what you just raised cannot be the same in that situation there. Joel, what do you think about this?
I think, yeah, when you take it away from sport, I think it's completely unjustifiable, because when you're looking at sport, it's almost like it's two separate things, like women's football, men's football, which I don't think is personally a good thing, but it is a thing that women's football and men's football are like two different fields. Whereas being a lawyer or a banker, they're the same thing. They're doing the same job. So I don't think there can be any way that a woman can be excused to do the same, to get paid to do the same job as a man. Like, it's just completely inexcusable.
All right, thank you very much. Max, to summarize.
Out of sport, the demand isn't what justifies the paying. So that's like away from my statement, because I'm saying where demand matters. In law or or banks, there isn't a demand to have male bankers. But it's not just for males. In modeling, there's what's it called? The women get paid a lot more than the men. The 10th best paid woman model earned more than the best paid male model. So it's not just happening one way, it's happening both ways. And I think it's justified when demand is the controlling factor.
Okay, I'm not going to take any more points on that because we have been recording for well over half an hour now. Max, James, Hugo, and Joel, thank you very much for coming on. It's been really good to have you on. Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe we can have you on again sometime soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Thank you.